What if the next strike doesn't extract a nation, but changes the balance of power across the entire world? What if one warning, spoken in the heat of rising tensions, becomes the sentence that history remembers? Stay with me, because by the end of this message, you'll understand why this confrontation is about far more than missiles, politics, or personalities. It's about the dangerous cost of pride, power, and the decisions leaders make when the whole world is watching. There are moments in history when a single sentence carries more weight than an entire arsenal of weapons. Sometimes the loudest sound in global affairs is not the roar of fighter jets or the launch of missiles, but a declaration that signals determination, resolve, and the possibility of a dangerous turning point. When Iran issued its warning that any future attack would be met with serious consequences, those words traveled far beyond national borders. They were heard in presidential offices, military command centers, diplomatic meeting rooms, financial institutions, and homes where ordinary people wondered what such a warning could mean for the future. The statement immediately became more than political rhetoric. It transformed into a symbol of rising tension, reminding the world that international disputes are rarely confined to the countries directly involved. Every carefully chosen word in a moment like this has the power to influence military calculations, reshape diplomatic conversations, and alter the expectations of allies and adversaries alike. History teaches that warnings between powerful nations are never delivered in isolation. They emerge after years of mistrust, competing interests, and unresolved disputes that slowly build pressure beneath the surface. Like cracks forming deep within the earth before an earthquake, these tensions often remain, unnoticed by many, until a dramatic statement suddenly captures the world's attention. By the time such words are spoken, they usually represent the visible expression of frustrations that have accumulated over decades. Every previous disagreement, every failed negotiation, every accusation, and every predatory action becomes part of the background that gives those warnings their focus. What appears to be a single headline is often the latest chapter in a much longer story, one written through diplomacy, military strategy, economic sanctions, regional rivalries, and competing visions of security and influence. Warnings of this nature also carry another powerful message. They are intended not only for the nation being addressed, but for every observer across the essence. Allies listen carefully to understand whether commitments will be tested. Rivals study every phrase to evaluate resolve and possible intentions. Markets react because investors recognize that geopolitical uncertainty can influence energy supplies, trade routes, and global economic stability. Military analysts examine every public statement alongside troop movements and strategic deployments, attempting to determine whether words are merely signals or indicators of possible future action. In today's interconnected world, no significant geopolitical warning remains confined within national borders. Information spreads instantly, and reactions begin almost as quickly as the statements themselves. At the same time, public declarations become part of a larger contest over perception. Every government seeks to project confidence, strength, and the ability to defend its interests. Leaders understand that appearing uncertain may encourage additional pressure, while projecting determination may discourage further action from opponents. Because of this, public warnings often serve multiple purposes at once. They reassure domestic audiences, communicate resolve to foreign governments, strengthen alliances, and attempt to influence the calculations of decision-makers on the opposing side. Every sentence is crafted with awareness that millions of people, including supporters, critics, military planners, and international observers, will examine every word for hidden meaning, subtle shifts in tone, and possible indications of future policy. Throughout history, some of the most defining moments have emerged when overwhelming power encountered unwavering defiance. It is a pattern that has repeated itself across continents, political systems, and generations. Powerful nations often possess advanced militaries, expansive economies, influential alliances, and the ability to shape global conversations. Yet history also reveals that strength measured by weapons alone has never guaranteed submission from those who believe their sovereignty, identity, or national interests are at stake. This is why confrontations between determined opponents are rarely simple contests of military capability. They become battles of endurance, perception, resolve, and the willingness of each side to demonstrate that it cannot be intimidated. In the current climate of heightened tensions, Iran's warning represents more than a response to a specific event. It reflects a broader message that resistance, whether symbolic or practical, remains central to how nations seek to protect their standing in the international arena. Such declarations are designed to communicate that pressure will not automatically produce compliance, and that actions taken against one side will invite consequences that neither side can fully predict. Power has always carried an expectation of influence. Nations with greater military capabilities often believe that superior resources provide greater freedom to shape events according to their strategic objectives. Aircraft carriers, advanced missile systems, intelligence networks, economic leverage, and diplomatic partnerships create an image of overwhelming strength. However, defiance introduces a variable that cannot always be measured by technology or numbers. Defiance is rooted in perception, political calculation, national identity, and the belief that yielding under pressure may carry greater long-term cost than confrontation itself. Leaders who embrace defiance often understand that their domestic audience is watching just as closely as the international community. Every statement they make becomes a demonstration of resolve intended not only for foreign governments, but also for their own citizens, military personnel, and regional partners. In this environment, backing down may be interpreted as weakness, while standing firm becomes a symbol of national pride and political legitimacy. This dynamic creates one of the most dangerous conditions in international affairs, because both sides begin operating under similar assumptions. One believes strength will deter resistance, while the other believes resistance will discourage further pressure. As each side attempts to reinforce its credibility, words become firmer, military readiness increases, diplomatic language grows sharper, and every new development is interpreted through the lens of competition rather than cooperation. What might have begun as a limited dispute gradually expands into a contest over reputation and influence. Neither side wants to appear vulnerable, and every response is carefully calculated to demonstrate capability without necessarily crossing the threshold into full-scale conflict. Yet history repeatedly shows that even carefully calculated actions can produce unintended consequences when each side interprets the other's intentions differently. The international community observes these confrontations with growing concern because the stakes extend far beyond the countries directly involved. Regional allies reassess their own security strategies, neighboring nations strengthen defensive preparations, and global institutions intensify diplomatic efforts to prevent further escalation. Energy markets react to uncertainty. Investors reconsider financial risks. Humanitarian organizations prepare contingency plans, and millions of ordinary people follow developments with increasing anxiety. A confrontation between determined governments rarely remains confined within diplomatic circles. It influences trade, transportation, regional stability, and public confidence across multiple continents. Every warning issued and every response delivered adds another layer of uncertainty to an already fragile international environment, where a single miscalculation, misunderstood signal, or unexpected incident could reshape the course of events in ways that no leader originally intended. Escalation is often discussed in terms of military movements, political speeches, and strategic decisions. Yet its deepest costs are rarely visible in the headlines that dominate the news cycle. The world tends to focus on dramatic images, missiles being launched, emergency meetings between world leaders, military deployments, and official statements promising retaliation. These moments capture attention because they are immediate and dramatic, but they represent only the surface of a much larger reality. Beneath every rising confrontation lies a network of consequences that spreads far beyond government buildings and military headquarters. Every additional threat, every retaliatory measure, and every increase in tension sends invisible ripples through economies, communities, diplomatic relationships, and the lives of millions of ordinary people who have no direct influence over the decisions being made. While leaders weigh strategy and national interests, families worry about safety, businesses reconsider investments, workers fear economic instability, and entire regions begin preparing for uncertainties that may never appear on television screens. The true price of escalation is rarely paid by speeches alone. It is carried quietly by people whose daily lives become increasingly shaped by fear, uncertainty, and disruption. One of the first hidden costs appears in the realm of economic stability. Modern economies are deeply interconnected, meaning that conflict in one strategically significant region can quickly affect countries thousands of miles away. Financial markets respond not only to actual military action, but also to the possibility of future instability. Investors become cautious, businesses delay expansion plans, insurance costs increase, and international trade begins to face new obstacles. Energy markets, in particular, often react sharply to geopolitical tensions involving major oil-producing regions or vital shipping routes. Even the suggestion of prolonged conflict can influence fuel prices, transportation costs, manufacturing expenses, and consumer goods across the globe. What begins as a diplomatic dispute between governments gradually reaches ordinary households through rising prices, changing employment conditions, and increased economic uncertainty. Many people may never fully connect these everyday challenges to the political decisions unfolding on the international stage, yet the relationship is often far stronger than it appears. Beyond economic consequences lies the equally significant cost to diplomacy. Escalation gradually erodes trust, making meaningful dialogue increasingly difficult. Diplomatic negotiations rely upon communication, compromise, and a willingness to leave room for peaceful solutions. However, when public warnings become harsher and retaliatory language dominates international discourse, opportunities for constructive engagement begin to shrink. Leaders face growing domestic pressure to maintain firm positions, reducing their political flexibility even if private negotiations continue behind closed doors. Every new accusation, military exercise, or public threat hardens attitudes on both sides, making compromise appear less acceptable to supporters at home. Over time, the atmosphere becomes one in which every concession is portrayed as weakness and that every attempt at dialogue is viewed with suspicion. The result is a cycle where communication becomes increasingly difficult precisely when it is needed most. Perhaps the most profound hidden cost is psychological rather than physical. Extended periods of geopolitical tension create an atmosphere of constant uncertainty that affects societies in subtle but meaningful ways. Citizens begin following news updates with growing anxiety, wondering whether today's warning will become tomorrow's crisis. Parents think about the future their children will inherit. Students question economic opportunities, and businesses hesitate to make long-term commitments in unpredictable environments. Military personnel remain on heightened alert. Diplomats work under extraordinary pressure. Humanitarian organizations prepare emergency responses, and neighboring countries reassess their own security policies. Even without direct conflict, prolonged escalation consumes attention, resources, and emotional energy. It reshapes public conversations, influences elections, strengthens divisions between nations, and creates a climate where fear often replaces confidence. Long before any battlefield determines winners or losers, the hidden costs of escalation have already begun reshaping economies, diplomacy, public trust, and the everyday lives of countless people across the world. In today's interconnected world, no major geopolitical decision exists in isolation. Every statement issued by a government, every military movement, every diplomatic response, and every strategic calculation has the potential to reach far beyond national borders. Unlike previous centuries, when conflicts could remain regional for extended periods, the modern international system is tightly woven together through trade, technology, finance, communication, and security alliances. A decision made in one capital can trigger reactions in dozens of others within hours.
Leaders are no longer making choices that affect only their own citizens. They are making decisions that can influence global markets, reshape international relationships, alter military planning, and affect the daily lives of millions of people who may have no direct connection to the dispute itself. This reality places enormous responsibility on every action taken during periods of rising tension, because the consequences rarely remain confined to the original participants. When nations exchange warnings or consider military options, the first reactions often come from their allies and strategic partners.
Governments begin consulting one another, reviewing defense commitments, strengthening intelligence cooperation, and evaluating whether existing agreements might require action. Regional organizations monitor developments closely, while international institutions encourage dialogue to reduce the likelihood of further escalation. Every country connected through security partnerships must consider how changing circumstances could affect its own interests, resources, and responsibilities. What begins as a disagreement between two governments gradually expands into a wider network of strategic calculations involving numerous states, each attempting to protect its own stability while avoiding unnecessary involvement.
These overlapping commitments demonstrate how deeply interconnected modern international politics has become, where the decisions of one nation often require immediate responses from many others. Economic consequences also spread with remarkable speed because global commerce depends heavily on confidence and predictability. Businesses invest where they expect long-term stability, financial institutions lend where risks remain manageable, and international companies rely upon secure transportation routes to move goods across continents. Whenever geopolitical tensions increase, uncertainty begins influencing these systems almost immediately. Investors monitor headlines, corporations reassess supply chains, shipping companies evaluate transportation risks, and commodity markets react to any possibility of disruption. Even countries located far from the center of the dispute may experience higher transportation costs, fluctuating energy prices, changing investment patterns, or slower economic growth. Consumers often notice these effects through rising prices, supply shortages, or shifts in employment opportunities without fully realizing that international political decisions are influencing their everyday lives. The modern global economy functions as a connected network, meaning that instability in one region can quickly produce consequences across multiple industries and nations. Technology and communication have also transformed the speed at which global consequences unfold. News travels instantly through television broadcast, online media, and social platforms, allowing billions of people to follow developments in real time. Public opinion forms rapidly, international pressure builds quickly, and misinformation can spread alongside verified information, complicating diplomatic efforts even further. Governments must now consider not only military and diplomatic outcomes, but also how their actions will be interpreted by global audiences. Every speech, photograph, official statement, or strategic move becomes part of an international conversation observed by allies, rivals, financial markets, humanitarian organizations, and ordinary citizens around the world. This constant visibility increases both accountability and pressure, making it more difficult for leaders to manage crises without attracting worldwide attention. Beyond politics and economics lies the broader human impact that accompanies every significant international decision. Rising tensions influence humanitarian planning, refugee preparedness, international aid efforts, educational exchanges, scientific cooperation, and cultural relationships that have taken years or even decades to build. Families living abroad worry about relatives. Students reconsider international study opportunities, businesses postpone expansion plans, and humanitarian agencies prepare for potential emergencies long before any direct conflict occurs. Neighboring countries strengthen border security, airlines adjust flight routes, insurance providers revise risk assessments, and countless organizations begin preparing for possibilities they hope never materialize.
Every decision made during moments of heightened geopolitical tension therefore carries consequences that extend well beyond immediate political objectives, influencing not only governments and military planners, but also communities, institutions, and individuals whose futures become increasingly shaped by choices made far beyond their own borders. Strength has always been one of the most respected qualities in international affairs. Every nation seeks to project confidence, protect its sovereignty, defend its citizens, and demonstrate that it possesses both the capability and the determination to respond when challenged. Military readiness, technological superiority, economic resilience, and diplomatic influence all contribute to the image of national strength. Leaders understand that a credible display of power can discourage aggression, reassure allies, and reinforce stability within their own borders. Throughout history, maintaining strength has often been viewed as an essential requirement for preserving peace because weakness, or even the perception of weakness, can invite pressure from rivals. Yet history also reveals another truth that is far less comfortable to acknowledge. The same strength that preserves peace can, if used without careful judgment, become the very force that accelerates destruction. The boundary separating deterrence from escalation is often far thinner than many imagine. And once that line is crossed, events can move beyond the control of even the most experienced leaders. One of the greatest challenges facing governments during periods of heightened tension is determining how to demonstrate resolve without unintentionally provoking a stronger reaction. Military exercises, strategic deployments, public warnings, and defensive preparations may all be intended as signals of readiness rather than invitations to conflict. However, the receiving side may interpret those same actions very differently. What one government describes as defensive preparedness may appear to another as preparation for offensive operations. A statement intended to discourage aggression may instead be viewed as a direct threat, requiring an immediate response. This gap between intention and perception has played a central role in many historical crises. Misunderstandings have repeatedly transformed manageable disputes into dangerous confrontations because each side believed it was acting rationally while assuming the worst about the motives of the other. In international politics, perception often becomes just as influential as reality, and every action carries the possibility of being interpreted through the lens of suspicion rather than trust. The pursuit of strength also creates intense political pressures within governments themselves. Leaders must balance national security with public expectations, diplomatic responsibilities, and international reputation. Citizens often expect decisive responses when their country faces external pressure, while political opponents may criticize any sign of restraint as weakness. Military institutions emphasize preparedness. Diplomatic officials encourage dialogue. Economic advisors warn about financial consequences, and humanitarian voices remind governments of the human cost of prolonged conflict. These competing priorities make decision-making extraordinarily complex. Every response must satisfy multiple audiences at once: domestic supporters, international allies, neutral observers, and potential adversaries. The challenge is not simply demonstrating strength, but demonstrating wisdom alongside strength. History consistently shows that nations remembered as truly powerful were often those capable of exercising restraint when emotions and public pressure demanded immediate power retaliation. The destructive potential of modern conflict makes this balance even more critical than in previous generations. Today's military technologies possess capabilities that extend far beyond conventional battlefields. Precision weapons, cyber operations, intelligence systems, satellite networks, and advanced missile defenses have transformed the speed and scale at which crises can evolve. A single miscalculation can disrupt communications, threaten critical infrastructure, affect global transportation networks, unsettle financial markets, and increase the likelihood of broader regional involvement. Because many nations are connected through alliances, trade relationships, and shared security interests,
Even a limited exchange carries the risk of triggering wider consequences that no participant originally intended. Every additional step toward confrontation narrows the opportunities for diplomacy, while expanding the possibility that events will unfold faster than leaders can control them.
This is why the difference between demonstrating strength and unleashing destruction often depends not only on military capability, but on discipline, patience, communication, and the ability to recognize that the greatest display of power is sometimes found in preventing a conflict before it begins, rather than proving who possesses the greater force. Every generation believes it is witnessing events unlike any that came before, yet history repeatedly reminds us that the patterns leading to international crises are remarkably first consistent. Nations rise, alliances shift, technologies evolve, and leaders change, but the fundamental challenges of power, fear, pride, and security remain strikingly familiar. The latest exchange of warnings between Iran and the United States serves as another reminder that the decisions made during moments of heightened tension often extend far beyond the immediate dispute. While headlines focus on dramatic statements and military preparedness, the deeper lesson lies in understanding how easily miscalculation, misunderstanding, and unchecked escalation can reshape the course of history. The world cannot afford to ignore this lesson because every major conflict has demonstrated that preventing a crisis is far less costly than attempting to contain one after it has already begun. History does not merely record victories and defeats. It records the consequences of choices that seemed manageable in the moment, but later proved impossible to reverse. One of the greatest lessons is that communication remains essential, even between adversaries. Throughout history, some of the most dangerous periods were not created simply because disagreements existed, but because dialogue gradually disappeared. When nations stop listening and begin speaking only through threats, military deployments, or retaliation, opportunities for peaceful resolution become increasingly limited. Diplomatic engagement does not eliminate differences, nor does it require governments to abandon their national interests. Instead, it provides mechanisms for reducing misunderstandings, clarifying intentions, and preventing isolated incidents from escalating into broader confrontations. Even during periods of profound disagreement, maintaining channels of communication allows leaders to manage crises with greater precision and avoid decisions driven solely by emotion or incomplete information. The absence of dialogue often creates a vacuum that is quickly filled by suspicion, assumptions, and worst-case scenarios, making every subsequent decision more dangerous than the last. Another lesson the world cannot ignore is that national pride, while important, must be balanced with strategic wisdom. Every nation values its sovereignty and seeks to demonstrate that it cannot be intimidated by external pressure. Leaders understand that protecting national dignity strengthens public confidence and reinforces political legitimacy. However, history also teaches that allowing pride alone to dictate policy can narrow the space available for compromise. When every concession is portrayed as defeat and every act of restraint is interpreted as weakness, governments may feel compelled to continue escalating even when peaceful alternatives remain available. True leadership often requires distinguishing between defending national interests and becoming trapped in cycles of retaliation that ultimately weaken everyone involved. Strength is measured not only by the ability to respond forcefully, but also by the ability to recognize when restraint serves long-term security more effectively than immediate confrontation. The international community also carries responsibilities that cannot be overlooked. Global stability depends not only on the actions of major powers, but also on the efforts of regional organizations, international institutions, humanitarian agencies, and allied governments working together to reduce tensions before they spiral beyond control. Mediation, diplomacy, humanitarian preparedness, confidence-building measures, and multilateral cooperation
all play essential roles in preventing crises from expanding into wider conflicts.
Smaller nations, though often less visible in global headlines, contribute significantly by encouraging dialogue, supporting international law, and promoting peaceful solutions that benefit the broader international system. Stability is rarely achieved through the efforts of a single country acting alone. It emerges through sustained cooperation among many actors committed to preserving peace despite profound political differences. Ultimately, the lesson the world cannot afford to ignore is that every decision made during moments of crisis leaves a lasting legacy. Future generations will not judge these events solely by the military capabilities displayed or the political statements delivered, but by whether leaders succeeded in preventing unnecessary suffering while protecting legitimate national interests. They will examine whether wisdom prevailed over impulse, whether diplomacy remained possible even amid deep disagreement, and whether opportunities to reduce tensions were recognized before events moved beyond anyone's control. The warnings exchanged today may eventually fade from the headlines, but the principles revealed through this moment will continue shaping international relations for years to come, reminding every nation that lasting security depends not only on strength, but also on foresight, patience, responsible leadership, and an unwavering commitment to preventing the kinds of consequences that history has shown can affect far more people than those who make some of the decisions themselves.